Good evening. Welcome to Theology on Tap. I'm Alan. I'm here again. So are you. Thanks for sticking around for episode 2. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about faith and reason, which is why I'm going to make a gin and tonic, because it has spirits and it fights scurvy. So, let's start with the rocks. Oh, just a little extra there. I'm feeling a little extra. Hope you're feeling a little extra tonight too. This many months after my last episode, I feel so bad for you guys. I'm so sorry I've let you down. I see all, two of you subscribers by now, so I'm doing really well. So, gin and tonic is made by having a little gin and tonic. It's pretty straightforward. I'm giving it the double shot so that I can kind of get a move on here. You know what? Actually, I like to have a little spritz of lime because back in the day, the old British sailors discovered that lime juice was keeping scurvy away. They discovered that scurvy was not a disease you get just for being at sea, but it's because of malnutrition. And it was the vitamin C in the limes that they were getting from Africa? India? Might have been India. The limes that they were taking back from India was keeping the scurvy away. So that's how Brits became known as limeys. So, shot of gin, spritz of lime, a little tonic water. You got yourself a gin and tonic. So, as we begin all things with a drink, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly hosts, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Saint Michael, please help me not to fuck this one up, and help me to bring the faith to the masses with sincerity. And, just do a decent job. Please be with me. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Also, another guy worth knowing about is Venerable Matt Talbot. He's a level 2 saint on his way. You become a full saint at level 3. And he was a drunkard in Ireland. Yeah, Irish Catholic drunk. Standard there. And anyway, he unlike me, he managed to quit drinking and punished himself for the rest of his life. Prayed a lot, gave everything he had to the poor, and he's a guy worth looking up. But Matt Talbot, here's to you, man. Keep me from being too stupid tonight, please. So, I want to talk about the shortcomings of human beings and the invention of language, and how it also is broken, like all human things. Language is a great thing, lets us communicate, but it has its shortcomings. It's confined by only the ways that people thought, and a lot of language happened by happenstance, to be quite honest. People just kind of and used sign languages for a very long time, millions of years probably, before they finally codified linguistic tones and came up with concrete words. And I bring all this up to say that just because you can't articulate something, that actually doesn't make you stupid. It's entirely possible you have a very crisp idea in your mind of a concrete concept of exactly how something works, and you just don't know how to say it. You don't know how to make the words happen to convey to somebody else. Just articulate your thoughts. Scientists sometimes don't even take a philosophical argument until they find a way to translate it into math for exactly this reason. This is why things like, we come up with a term like general relativity, which sums up a whole shit ton of hours of lectures of Einstein. But any physicist, once they've gone through that, they can just say, oh yeah, the rules of general relativity. Got it. We got a keyword. And from there, the conversation can continue instead of having to constantly re-explain how Einstein got to this theory to begin with, right? Another really cool concept on that point check out a guy named Eric Weinstein. He's got a really snazzy new theory of how the whole universe works. And it kind of takes string theory and kicks that over, because string theory has been a dead end for a couple of decades now. And yet nobody has solved the problems in the standard model. And if you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. But it basically is like how and what an atom is and where possibly the universe began. And he's got a much bigger idea that could possibly put all of the things we know into a bigger universe. And then that would actually explain the incoherence we have in the current explanation we have of the standard model, and why it breaks down at certain high energy levels or speeds, why it has a limit of the speed of light and things like that. Again, I know what I'm talking about, and I can't put it into words. Not quite the way Eric Weinstein does. And by the same token, if you watch his videos, I promise you, he's got the equations, but even he can't. I guarantee you what's in his head is very concrete. He knows absolutely what he's talking about, but he doesn't know how to say it. And his best way to say it is through math. That is true of a lot of things. But even math is a language to itself, although it is very accurate to describing the universe in many ways, on multiple levels. This is kind of a philosophical, kind of a linguistic. I mean, this is core to what it means to be a human being and interact with other human beings. And more to the point, picture being God and actually having created everything in the universe, and you understand how it works. But your little small creations that you make, they don't get it, and they never will. God kind of tried to tell us the whole story from the beginning, from our ancestors. It was revealed to the proto-Zoroastrianists or whatever about, the Adam and Eve story and all that jazz. And it's like, they understood what they wanted to say and what they understood about themselves and each other and what humans are prone to do with each other and how they react to nature and the relationship that they have with nature, where they both master it and also it has its dick in their mouth and can do what it wants, because nature cannot be beat. There's many ways in which we command nature, and there's other ways that nature commands us, and we're just never going to beat it. I'm sorry. No matter how many tools or science we come up with, we will always be at the mercy of nature, because we are mortal. Because, I think I covered this once with Warren T. Maybe I'll talk about that later. But the dick in the butter dish gag is a hilarious one. But God's the ultimate authority, and he's just that's it. He created all this shit, and it's not your job to figure out how it works. What he cares about is that you figure out how to have a relationship with him. And it starts with very abstract allegories like Adam and Eve. And we didn't really get it. And so he tries again with revealing what happens to Noah and what happens to Abraham and what happens to Moses and what happens to David and then Solomon and all the way up until finally he just says, fuck it, I need to put my feet on the ground and tell you. I'm going to send my only son and show you the way I want you to live. And even then, it's really telling to me that Jesus never writes a book. And you could say, oh, well, that's because he was, a carpenter and he was uneducated. Well, that's true. Although I will fight you on this, because there is a scene in, I think, the Gospel of Luke, but possibly in all three of the Synoptic Gospels, where Jesus reads from the book of Isaiah to the congregation at temple, and then says, today this has been fulfilled, bitches. And everyone's like, fuck. And so, he could clearly read. So if he could read, I would hope he could write. Maybe he couldn't afford paper, but all of that doesn't matter as much as the fact that if God was going to come to earth at all, he could choose how to do it. So why didn't he come as a king, or as a great general, or as a high priest? He didn't. He deliberately chose to be born of a, carpenter out in bumfuck nowhere. So, why? Why would he do that? It can't. The humility is a part of that. But I am thinking it's significant that Jesus didn't write a book, because he knew that words were not getting through to people. They had not. for over 1,000 years that the biblical books had been written and interpreted and reinterpreted and philosophized and circle jerked and elaborated on, and nobody was figuring it out. So why bother writing another book when God comes down for the future people, the future followers to follow? Because, again, words can always be misinterpreted. I think I went over these 6 words before, right? I never said you stole money, right? So Jesus doesn't want to write a book. Instead, Jesus has 12 people live with him. He has those people be his roommates. They eat where he eats. They eat what he eats. They sleep where he sleeps. They follow him where he goes. They dress like him, and they listen to him talk day in, day out, and they know him well. They know everything about him. They know when he gets up in the morning. They know how late he likes to stay up at night. They know what jokes he thinks is funny, what his favorite food is, what foods give him gas, and what his farts smell like. And they know how he makes his bed. They knew everything about Jesus. And they heard every word he said for these 3 years. And all we have are the Gospels, which are about that thick. There's no way that that's all the speaking Jesus did in 3 years. But those that lived with him knew what he meant when he said it. Because they knew him well enough. Really fucking knew him. This needs to be drilled in your head. How well they knew him. Okay? On the personal level. So, they didn't need to have photographic memory of every word he said. They just needed to know what he meant. And they could recount the things that he said and contextualize them for him on his behalf when he wasn't there. After he'd already died and gone back to heaven, because they were there. They knew what he meant. They were the fucking apostles. And they tried to teach their closest followers what they knew of living with Jesus. And it was a way of life that God wanted to pass on. Not a set of words, but a way of life. And it's not like any of these apostles actually lived it perfectly either. Starting with Peter, the guy Jesus assigned it to follow his footsteps, to say, Simon, you are the rock. You get it. And unto you I build my church. Upon this rock I build my church, and I leave you the keys to my kingdom. And what you bind, none shall unbind. Or what you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. And what you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. But I got that confused for the actual line in Isaiah that references, where I think it is King David, or no, a different high priest. I think he leaves Saul in charge. But anyway, whoever that is, his words are exactly, what you, with these keys, what you lock, none shall open. What you open, none shall shut. So, that whole line from Jesus is like a direct quote, or a parallel quote from an Old Testament line. This further proves the authority of the Pope and the Church, right? So, going back to the failures of language, right? It's a necessity for us to communicate with each other. We could be like monks and take vows of silence, but then I don't know, I'd be killed in the first 2 hours. And just sit with each other side by side and do as the next one does. And, try to learn from them by monkey see, monkey do. But it's not quite enough, especially when you're trying to really meditate on the deeper truths of what Jesus was like and who Jesus was, what it meant for him to be both God and man at the same time. Fully God, fully man, not 50-50, in the same way that you are entirely your mother's child and entirely your father's child. You're not split down the center. You can't pick and see what parts of you come from who. You're all of both. That was Jesus, But you have to come up with, if you're gonna dive into these topics and really get at the meat of them, you gotta somehow come up with keywords and terms like general relativity to shortcut the hours of lecture that it would take to go over in a concept that you've already covered, right? And that's where we come to things like doctrine. A doctrine is not just bullshit made up because the church wants to oppress people. No, it's because The apostles actually were there with God. They knew how he wanted us to live. And they knew he was fucking God because he came back from the dead and they saw him face to face. And they recognized him and they fingered his wounds and said, God, that's fucking gross. And then they were like, he's the real deal. Like, he's the real fucking deal. And so they, like, just, like, imagine how traumatic that must be. Like, put yourself in the apostles' shoes. To see that shit. To see your friend crucified, like, slaughtered in public as an innocent guy. And then you see him again walking around and he's like, shalom, bitches. And you're like, that's gotta be jarring. That'll fuck you up. And they were like, dude, I saw it. And they were like, you've got to do it. Like, I lived with him for these 3 years, now you need to do it too. You need to live like him. You need to live like me because we can, this is our only chance at it's not even like, some people say, oh, you're just grasping for immortality. And it's like, well, to the apostles, no. I actually really doubt that was it. I think it was that they knew that that was God. And that was the purpose of their being in the first place. Like, a lot of people ask, why do we have to die? But the better question is, why did you deserve to live? And it was like, this is what they understood. Is they were like, no, once you knew Jesus, it was like, God, I live just to have the opportunity to be close to God. And the rest of it just didn't matter. They were like, you have to do this because you have to do this. Because you don't exist without this purpose of needing to do this. You are called to live like Jesus and with Jesus. Not that I'm an example of this, BT dubs. And Jesus knew that too. We're all sinners. Look at all the sinners Jesus talked to throughout the Gospels. The whores, the cheaters, the tax collectors, the thieves. Like, buddy, he forgives everybody, okay? But he also calls everybody. And he doesn't lower his standards just so you can make it. You're asked to step up and live this life. And try. Just don't give up. But keep trying. But I'm steering off course. My point is, you do things like, again, coming up with doctrine is kind of like talking about music, right? Like, there's a band I really like, and they're kind of funky, but they've got a wide range. They do some disco, they do some pop. Of course, pop in the 70s was disco, really. But they even had a couple of R&B hits, and it's like, well, then who could I possibly be talking about? Because, when I think funk, I think about like a bass guitar and kind of they didn't always do 4 on the floor. It's not like reggae, because that's a different kind of beat. And as I'm dropping all these terms, songs are probably going through your head, and you're thinking, like, you can hear the music, or you can feel the beat, and maybe consider the instruments. Like, was there horns involved, or was it all electric guitar? Just by dropping these words, right? I'm summoning these huge ideas and concepts. And the best part is, I haven't played a single note. I can't play an instrument. I don't have instruments in front of me anyway. But even if I did, I'm tone deaf. Let's be real. This is why I love karaoke. But, I can still talk about music and you can follow this conversation because I've referenced all of these genres. And the idea of a genre is, that's what groups Funkadelic with the Daz Band and the Gap Band and the OJs, and you kind of know where that all goes. But as I talk about, disco, you start thinking about the Bee Gees and how that's different from Parliament. But if this was like a disco funk band, maybe I'm talking about Casey and the Sunshine Band? Except no, I said that they had some R&B influences. They had a couple of R&B songs, and so it was like, well, then who had a wider range than that? Because we're talking about people more like in the Marvin Gaye style, and oh, you must be talking about Earth, Wind, and Fire. Like, yes, I'm talking about Earth, Wind, and Fire. You can't have that conversation without defining the genres. But any musician will tell you, being labeled as a genre can sometimes piss you off, because it feels confining. If you're going to start a salsa K-pop fusion band, the last thing you want is for everyone to think of you as salsa K-pop fusion. Like, maybe one day you do want to play funk, or maybe one day you want to play Japanese punk. And it's like, you don't want to be limited. You just want to play the music you want to play. And the last thing you want is for somebody to say, sorry son, that's English metal, you can't play that. And it's like, well, I can play that though. It's just, I used all these words to describe what I had done before so that I didn't have to play all these fucking songs. Like, you realize I only spent 3 minutes talking about music, and I had probably put a shit ton of music in your head without you having to listen to 7 hours of this music. The genre as a tool of discussion to philosophize about music is very important. But someone who experiences music, especially somebody who plays music, can find that confining because they understand that that term is just a shortcut for other things, and it does not... Just having the definition does not restrict the thing itself and say in an authoritarian way, now you must be only that thing that I've described. Does that make any sense? Once again, the idea is concrete in my head. The question is trying to articulate it to you. That's the hard part. And this is kind of like the failure of our education systems. We have like standardized testing, right? We want to see that somebody is smart. So we say, here's a couple of things you need to know. And here's a couple of ways that unambiguously you could pick the correct answer out of A, B, C, or D if you had the right thought process. Or even if you had a close to right thought process and you were off a specific way, here's a red herring at B that if you answered the wrong way, at least we know why you're answering it that way. The other two are bullshit choices and D is correct. But what happens is at some point we realize that the whole thing's a game, and we look at who's making the test and how they strategically scatter what the answers are so that you can't like just Christmas tree it, or it's not like A is always the right answer. So there's a way of gaming the system, and like Andrew Yang was really good at this, for example, and for that matter, I knew a girl in my neighborhood who her mom would make like Kaplan tests to like study for the SAT, and she got a 1600 back in the 90s when that was the highest score you could get. She got a 1600 on like 2 practice tests and then on the real thing, and it was like, oh well, okay. And she was a smart girl, but she would tell you herself, no, I'm just good at testing, because testing is a bullshit skill. It's a bullshit skill that is a meta skill because of meta language about education that certain people have arbitrarily come up with, and I gamed their system. I don't know the shit. I just know how the people who know the shit arrange the shit. And I'm good at arranging shit. See what I'm saying? Like, language is a funny thing like that. And when you make more complex concepts in it, it allows you to contemplate even more complex things from that scaffolding, but it does have the failure of people getting caught up in the scaffold being all there was, when the truth is that scaffold was built to shortcut a whole lot of realities that are more amorphous than that, but we just wanted to have a way to quickly refer to all of that shit so that we could downplay it and get to the next step. And this is why people hate doctrine, is they think that it's so constricting and so anal retentive, and it's like, well, it is, but the people that wrote this doctrine over the course of Catholic history all understand, like gosh, get it out, buddy. The theologians all understood that when they made these terms, the terms themselves did not confine the idea to only the terms defined. That it was really a reference to all this other stuff, and it was kind of in the back of their heads kept amorphous as they continued to meditate on other things. They tried to make that distinction, and I'm telling you this is the case over centuries of thought, and you can see it from St. Paul up through St. Augustine up through St. Thomas Aquinas, all right? Like, they retain the larger idea, even though they will name drop specific doctrine title. But, I was going to make a different point, but now I forgot it. But the point of, the idea is that, again, it is true that you could codify things and then make a test and then test somebody on the code. But really what you've done is you're teaching to the test. You're not teaching. Right? We all hate that about school. We all hate that we're trained to take standardized tests and the SAT, but we're not actually learning anything in school, right? It's bullshit. And when it comes to Catholicism, when you read doctrines and stuff, you got to kind of try to look between the lines. You got to read between the lines. You got to see what they're clawing at, because in the people who put these doctrines together, in the minds of those people, the apostles, the early church doctors, BT dubs, doctor was a Latin word for teacher. So the doctors of the church were just the smartest people in the church back in the day. And that was before they had medical doctors. Incidentally, Japanese does the same thing. The suffix sama can mean Lord, but it also can refer to somebody who is a great sage, or even somebody who is a doctor of any discipline. So, like, the idea of, like, greatness and respect of knowledge is baked into both of those terms. But yes, the doctors of the church, they were just the sages of the church. They were the smart ones. They were the ones who, they got it. And it clicked with them in a way that they couldn't put into words. Or they tried to put into words, and it filled volumes, and yet they never nailed it. Because they were never apostles. And even the apostles weren't Jesus. Only Jesus nailed God's call so well that he came back from the dead completely in his body, still living. The same fucking body. The same one, because it still had the spear wound and the nails holes in it. Like, keep that in mind, right? Like, if you're going to tattoo your shit belongs to God. And when you come back, you're still going to have that shit, whether it's relevant or not to you then. So, I like to leave my body intact for... It's fine, I'll walk this off. I like to leave my body intact for God to do what he will with it, and so that I'll have my body back when I come back. Not that I think I'm good enough to, like, be resurrected like Jesus, because none of us were. But, you know, on the last day, when the whole world is just over, that's supposedly what's going to happen to us. So, call me selfish, but I'm not an organ donor, and I'm also not going to cremate myself, because I'm going to be given this again. This same shit. Bald and everything. And I'm going to leave it ready for me when I come back. Anyway. So you don't want to teach to the test, because that's not really learning anything. And genre is a necessity to discuss music, but you don't want it to be a confining thing. So, like, what can you really do with words to describe how Jesus wanted us to live? And the answer is, you can't do it with words. You have to do it with lives, with action, with lifestyles. And even then it's going to be flawed, because all of us are not Jesus. So we're all going to fuck this up, in one way or another. But Jesus said, Simon, you get it. And you're the rock, Peter, and on this rock I build my church. And all y'all apostles are going to be the bishops, and you're going to train other people, and we need to keep this order going, this ecclesia. We need to stay the course and have humans who live here trying to show others the path throughout the ages, training new ones in the way. And that's actually what it was called. Before it was Christianity, it was just called the way. You can see that actually in the Acts of the Apostles. If you read the Acts of the Apostles, they keep saying, was following Christ on the way. And these were other followers on the way. Like, every time you see that, that actually should be, like, capitalized, because they didn't know what they called their movement. It was the way. Because there's only one God, and he had his only son. And so it was like, there's no other way to live but this one. Like, this was fucking it. It was the way. And again, it's not like they were grasping for immortality. They're not Scrooge McDuck or some shit. It's just that this is the way. This is what you're supposed to do with your life. So, as a side note, part of the schism with the Eastern Orthodox Church was that they had more of an attachment to the idea that once you define a term, it reduces the idea of what it's referring to. It reduces the concept to the sign, which you should not do. you should always remember that every sign points to a place. And so, like, just because it says, like, you know, New York 20 miles over there, it doesn't mean, like, whoa, this sign is New York. No, this sign's not New York. This sign says it's over that way, 20 miles. The sign is not the thing itself. The Eastern Orthodox were very gripped onto this idea, and actually so were the Jews, and even a lot of archaic religions. Like, I think, no, Hindu had names for their gods. But that's why the Jews never referred to God by name, only by Yahweh, because Yahweh was not his actual name. It was the pronunciation of the acronym of I am who am, the tetragrammaton. It's kind of like YOLO. YOLO doesn't mean anything, but it stands for you only live once. So, yeah, it's the same idea. It's like Yahweh means YOLO, but you only live forever. But they wouldn't give a name to God, or for that matter, when Moses specifically asked him, "What's your name?" He was like, "Fuck off! I am. Who am? I'm it." Jesus, guy. And it was really funny if you said that to Moses, right? And but he said that because as soon as you give a name to God, that reduces what God is to the idea of what's associated with that name. And you can't contain God to a name. That's the whole point. And so, like, with the theologians over the ages, they knew they described more and more about the nature of God, but all they were doing was trying to translate an idea that was mostly concrete in their heads, but they still understood that it would never be the whole thing. And they were okay with that. Like, they accepted their limitation. But they said, look, there's this one aspect of it that I can make concrete for you, and here's a term for it. All right? You know, the Assumption of Mary kind of things. Because somebody wanted to know about it, and they had arguments about whether or not, like, did Mary float up to heaven, or did heaven reach down and pull her up, or did she go to sleep, or did she, like, how did Mary die? It's not in the Bible, and there's no other, like, the apostles were around when it happened, so like, does any of them have a record? And it's like, well, they thought about this long and hard, because it's, to some of them, it actually mattered, and then they came up with a term for it. But the Eastern Orthodox were like, well, but we kind of feel what happened, and we'd rather feel, not think. So the Eastern Orthodox said, fuck this shit, we don't want to be codifying things so much, we want to just experience it. Because, and this is, again, the Eastern Orthodox is totally fucking legit. Like, they're descended of a certain segment of the apostles. And, but they were the ones who were like, I don't know, we don't want to deal with the anal retentiveness of the Latins, who really want to hash this out and then write down a rule and extrapolate from there. They were like, no, like, we know how Jesus lived and we know how it went, and that's the important part. And they just wanted to stick with that. And it's more amorphous. So, hey, kudos to you if you want to take the Eastern Orthodox route. The exit's right here, and full respect, man. But I'm Roman Catholic, and that's where I'm going to go. But that's a general rule toward the Eastern Orthodox. Is they try to be more, or less specific, I should say, less concrete in their terms. I say all this to say that Jesus still found it important to establish followers, a church, the ecclesia, to do what he was doing and carry that tradition forward into time. Through Peter, through the other apostles, be that the Eastern Orthodox or the Latins, the Roman Rite, which is what Peter led. And Peter being the rock, the Roman Catholics went his way and said, no, that, like, this is the tradition, this has got to be what Jesus wanted because it's the primacy of Peter, right? So the point of the church continuing to exist is so that they can be not a document like a Bible that you're just stuck with, and I guess you can only interpret the scripture like solo scriptura. No, instead, there's this living body of the church that continues to not reinterpret, but contextualize the Bible into the current time at all times. And that's what's being done through the succession of the popes. And all the bishops, really, because they act as a group. The Pope is only the one who breaks ties. kind of the way the vice president is supposed to break ties if the Senate has a 50-50 vote. Like, otherwise the vice president is really kind of not that useful. But that's actually the Pope. The Pope's the vice president. The president is fucking Jesus. So, well, you know, not having sex with Jesus, but is Jesus. Anyway, but the Pope's just there to break ties, bro. Like, he's the whole, like, he doesn't actually have a whole lot of power over the other bishops. Or he's not supposed to. He's supposed to be first among equals, as they say. Now, the Eastern Orthodox also debate that one. They think that over the course of time, the Pope has been given more leverage to be straight up, you know, the president, not even the president, because the president's not supposed to have that kind of power either, but they think that the Pope has kind of become a dictator, and they don't want to go that route, but the Roman Catholics know that that's not entirely true, that the Conference of Bishops does have the authority to do something about a Pope if they know it's wrong. Boy, oh boy. But, life and times, I guess. You know? But that's the idea, is the Pope is really just supposed to kind of be the referee. He's supposed to be the one who says, look, man, we've hashed this shit out all day. Wow, I already poured myself some liquor. Let's go ahead and not do that. And, go Pats. And, he's just supposed to be the last authority, the final word who says, look, we've been hashing this out all day and we can't come to a decision. I'm thinking win by decision, that guy, ding, 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 Little Mac. And, so I'm running out of tonic water, and I've been told that club soda is a terrible substitute, but I think I might just do it anyway. You know what? No, that's not true. I only had a single shot, so let's just have like a single tonic. What up? Oh yeah, look at that. That's a healthy, like, that's just beautiful. That's a perfect drink. It's fine. My wife would never kill me over that one. So, not this late at night. So, so these folks that knew who Jesus was, like for real though, the apostles and their immediate successors, they were the ones who said, some of them wrote stuff down, most of them were not educated enough to know how to write, so they were dictating to other people who did. Like Peter, the fisherman, he did not know how to write. So he would dictate and his followers would write the actual letters from Peter, which are in the Bible now. There are shit tons of other books that were written about that time, about Jesus, such as the Gospel of Thomas, that the other apostles and their followers read it and said, I call bullshit. Because I lived with the guy, or I knew somebody who lived with the guy, and parts of this are saying things like the body, like it's implying that the body is not important, and we're going to get back to that later, but it's implying that it's the spirit that's important, not the body, and that's heresy. Like, that's wrong teaching. That's not what Jesus taught. It's not how Jesus lived. Otherwise, why would Jesus come back from the dead in the same body he left? If he could just, like, make his body anew, why wouldn't he make it unwounded? But he didn't. He came back with the fucking scars. So, Gospel of Thomas, you're full of shit. Out. This was written by an imposter, or if it was written by Thomas, he didn't get it anymore. And, like the people that really knew their shit, they got together and they said, okay, that one's out. And that's how canon was determined. And this is true among the Jews, too. Like, way back in deeper antiquity, as the Old Testament was being compiled, there were plenty of books that were like, you know, candidates and submissions to be inspired. And those of the high priests who were like, I don't know, man, I talked to, like, Abraham, who we all respect, and he wouldn't have gone for this shit. And I know, because XYZ, I was there, and his son told me, and nah, man, Jacob wouldn't stand for that shit. And he's like, okay, then, you're out. And that's exactly how the New Testament was formed, in the same way. Like, the people that really knew, like, they got together, and they had all the books on the table, and they compared them, and they said, this is right, this is wrong, because I knew the guy. I fucking knew the guy. And if I didn't know the guy, I at least knew the guy who knew the guy. I lived with John the Apostle for 10, 17 years, and this just doesn't sound like the kind of shit John was talking about. And I don't buy it. So That one's out. You should trust what is canon, okay? And because it is the Roman Catholics that determined canon. This is what's so ironic to me about like sola scriptura as a concept is stupid to me, because it's like, oh, if it's not in the Bible, then you shouldn't believe it. And that's why the Catholics are full of shit, because everything they believe in is not in the Bible. It's like, they're the ones who compiled the Bible. God damn it. You weren't there, Martin Luther. I'm sorry. But, like, they kept the books. They also kept the people. And the people kept the tradition with a capital T. And they said, like, we know what it was about. We know what our teachers were about. And we know the context that they put these writings into. And it all goes together. It's all intertwined. Because you want to sit here and say, I don't need to listen to music. I've just got genre. Why would you do that? Like, you can't confine yourself to just the Bible. That's so fucking stupid. But anyway, sorry. This is the point of the church existing. And Jesus knew this in his lifetime. That's why he established a church. That's why he did not write a book himself. And the real story of how God wants us to live is told and retold and retold and retold through the biblical stories until it's finally lived out in Jesus. I got an interesting riddle for you that I learned as a kid that kind of helped me to understand this. I didn't learn this in religious school, by the way. I didn't learn this in Sunday school. I learned this in gifted class. It was just a brain teaser. But it ended up being like one of the greatest life lessons I ever heard. It's called Wally World. So let me take a piss, and you listen to this segment with my buddy Tim. Did I bring my juice? I brought my juice. I'll bring my left or right side. So, yeah, well this is just ice. so the idea here is, if you'd like ice.
Yes,
good, you're shifting some ice. Okay, there you go. One more,
and also you should have your donuts like refrigerated.
Oh shit. You know what it usually is? And I think I filled the fridge for a party and forgot to put it back in there.
We can't do this tonight, then. This needs time to.
Well, what about club sodas? They're just as good.
No. That's what I was like. What the fuck?
Alright, well I have lots of ice. And the gin's not refrigerated either.
No, dude.
The lime juice is refrigerated.
I'm gonna put the. Well, fuck. I'm gonna put them down there.
Alright, yeah. I'm gonna have a warm one, and we can get you.
We'll just say these were properly chilled, and no one will know the difference.
Yeah, no one will know the difference. So to make a gin and tonic, you mix gin and tonic. I don't usually go 50-50. Some people.
I'm like third, a quarter.
Yeah, I'm like a quarter.
I'm not gonna throw this away because it needs to be cut up once you have scissors.
Yes, I am. Oh, hey, you know what? Check it out, man. We love seagulls here. There you go.
Is that how you hand scissors to people? Do we have to have safety lessons?
That's not what this podcast is about.
Bogart your podcast for safety tips.
Yeah. We save sea turtles, not humans.
Who gives a fuck about humans?
Actually, Jesus gives a fuck about humans. That's why we're here. So, oh darn it! I usually do the lime first because then it distributes the lime better rather than sitting all on top.
Shouldn't you
do you like the spritz? Hey, it is recording, dude.
Oh, is it recording?
Yeah. What's up? I'm gonna lime you. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just watching. Make sure you're doing this right.
Okay.
Oh, that's a lot.
Perfect. It's a lot of gin.
That's a lot of tonic.
It's a lot of gin.
How much gin did you put in?
With ice up to about there.
It needs to be half, and then a little bit of tonic.
Oh yeah. Oh, so you did want it heavy. I thought you said not to go so heavy.
Well, I can't. You're right. I can't do this tonight because I'm driving.
Yeah.
But at home, when I'm watching the kids.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's a triple gin.
They can't escape the house, and you've already child-proofed it. So, time to drink. Cheers. So, the idea of my riddle here, okay? It's called the Wally World riddle.
Okay.
It was named this well before people started calling Walmart Wally World, so it has nothing to do with Walmart.
People call Walmart Wally World?
Some people, you don't remember that? In high school, everyone was calling it Wally World? Alright. Back where I was, people were calling it Wally World. But anyway, so in this riddle, right? The idea is...
I'm going to have to take a nap after this one drink, probably.
Alright. The idea of it is... Wally World is a magical, mystical place where It's not a place that's so different from where we live, but they have a very strange culture and they're very xenophobic. So the only way to get into Wally World...
This isn't from Vacation?
I don't think so. What do you mean Vacation?
Did you ever see the movie Vacation when they go to Wally World?
No. What is that?
What?
It's called Wally World too?
Yes.
What the earth? It's the third Wally World. All right. Well, don't Google it now. We're taping. I'll look it up later.
Yeah, Wally World. Come on, John Candy.
Okay. Well, is there a riddle wherein they need to figure out how to get in? Probably not.
I don't remember. No.
Okay.
But they do have a BB gun.
There's no BB guns involved, but there are BB guns in Wally World, and we'll get to that.
Okay.
So the idea is you need to figure out how they think to be culturally assimilated before they even let you into the country. Okay.
Right.
So the way they do that is I will tell you things that you can find in Wally World, and then by contrast, you will figure out what I'm talking about and say back to me your idea of how you would tell a security guard or customs agent or whatever how you would get into Wally World. All right, and you'd say, I know your people. You have this and this, and not have this.
Okay.
So, for example, I'll give one to start off. They have pools.
So I've approached the security guard.
No. This is the customs agent you're trying to get past.
That's what I'm still thinking of John Candy.
Oh, okay. So yeah, you would tell them something like, I know you guys like to go swimming,
right,
and there are lots of pools, but there's no water. I'm like, okay. So that's weird, and then we start talking about other things that they have. Like, for instance, they have trees, but there are no leaves on the trees.
Okay.
And there are, I'm going to start the timer in a minute. Because I'm only going to fuck with you for 5 minutes. after that, mercy.
Yes.
There are Jeeps. There's no cars, just Jeeps. Most of them are Hummers, if you count those as Jeeps.
Well, SUV, yeah.
SUV? Okay, well, there's no SUVs, but there are Jeeps.
Alright.
Right, so you're following this now. There's swimming in pools, but no water. They got Jeeps and Hummers, but no SUVs.
Right.
They play basketball, they play football, they don't play rugby. Pretty much any ball sport will go. Even soccer. They have foot doctors, but no hand doctors.
Is all of this still the riddle?
This is all still the riddle.
Okay.
And so when you start picking up, you name to me, would they have this but not that? When you figure out the pattern. When you figure out what their lifestyle is, as it were.
Do they have pets but no animals?
No.
Mm-hmm.
Neither pets nor animals. No cats, no dogs. I know, how'd you go there, right? No turtles, no birds. I'm trying to think if there's anything they might have. Well, they allow dogs if they're puggles.
Do they have the internet but no computers?
No, and no smartphones. But they have other forms of communication.
Do they have telephones but no... they have phone towers but no telephones? This is me fucking with you now.
No, it is. Well, it is, but it's not. Because the same token, that's a valid thing to throw out. And no phones, no towers. I'm trying to think of a good response that I can give you back for that to lead you toward their way.
Show me the way.
Show you the way. They call them cells. So I guess they have cellies.
Okay.
But nobody knows what you're talking about if you call it a phone.
Okay. But it's still a phone.
Functionally.
Okay. Let's see. Do they have roads but no one drives on them?
They have streets.
Streets. Do they have boulevards and parkways? Or are they driveways and main streets?
No, none of the above. Streets, and I'm trying to think.
Is their world round but they think it's flat?
Ooh, that's a really good one.
Because I think we're in Wally World. That's what we're talking about. It's us.
No, they would describe it as living on a ball anyway. So they
Turtle?
get that.
Back of the turtle?
Yeah. Well, no, there's no turtles, remember?
But that doesn't necessarily mean it's not a real turtle. It could be a big rock that's in the shape of a turtle.
Yeah.
Sculpture, right?
Yeah.
Is there a Stephen King but no Dark Tower series?
Nice. What would they? I mean, they do enjoy horror books.
Okay.
They don't care for sci-fi and fantasy. They have.
Do they have colleges but no schools?
Yes. No, there's colleges and schools. No universities.
Okay. Hmm.
And they have no libraries, but they're full of books.
What's the timer at?
Okay, you ready to get your mind blown? You got a minute and 15 left. They have floors, walls, doors, and roofs, but no houses.
Windows?
Nope.
Because of the houses.
Right.
So, like, how am I going to guess this answer then? Because, like, you're leading me in a direction where it just sounds like completely like a dystopian society. So I'm like trying to. So I have to figure out like what is Wally World or like.
Yeah. Like what is their pattern? They don't like. There is. I mean, I wouldn't say it's consistent, but there's a pattern.
They have things that are real, but they choose not to look at them in a way. Like, well, no.
Well, they look at them, but they're not real. That's what's weird.
Was this like some kind of like Jesus parable?
Oh yeah, let's go on there eventually.
I need like a buzzer that says ding ding ding.
Yeah.
Or,
Right. We did this. Well, I'll tell you after, because I don't want to waste your time.
It's fine now. You can waste my time.
but for the sake of the exercise, as it were. Oh, just kidding. Okay, time's up. Fuck.
I thought I had a minute left.
Nope.
I want a
that
refund.
went fast.
I want a refund on my 5 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. So the trick is everything in Wally World has to have a double letter. That's why they have patterns and no consistency.
I wasn't even picking up on that at all.
Nobody would. That's the whole point. And so like
you overanalyze it.
Exactly. And so it's like there's definitely a pattern here, but most people are looking at the objects. It's like that's the fun part is when you're trying to show somebody this is you say to them like there's this and there's not that, and you're like, but that can't possibly work that way until you're like, well, but you should have been looking for double letters, not cognitive meaning of the things I'm talking about.
So if I probably had what could have maybe have helped me because I'm visual, not necessarily auditory, is if I had a visual of what these things were. Not necessarily spelled out.
Or, yeah. And so, like, that's one of the things, is, like, there's trees with no leaves. Or, like, that's the one I love to drop on people, is walls, floors, doors, and roofs, no houses.
And I'm thinking windows.
And everybody's like, well, but you've got all the fucking parts. Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, you're not looking at the right things when you're trying to solve this riddle. And so, like, that was kind of my whole beef in part of the exercise, the point of it, is that a lot of Catholic concepts are, like, they seem like they'd be opposed to each other, but it's like if you're looking at this other reason why they'd be connected, it makes perfect sense. So they seem like they're a paradox, but they're actually like in healthy balance with each other because both of them conform to a different pattern entirely. And that's kind of the point of the exercise. So I end up referencing it a lot over the course of all of my shit. But yeah, so thanks for participating. When I did this in like 5th grade, my teacher did it with the whole class, and we had to be subjected to this shit for 30 minutes.
So thank you for 5.
Yeah,
really
I spared you. I spared
4
you.
minutes.
Yeah, 4 and some change. And yeah, we sat there like racking our brains and pissing each other off. And then I'll tell you what was worse, what was more humiliating, was when the couple of kids started getting it. A couple of them would get it by dumb luck. Like you started throwing out bullshit answers, and I was like, "Oh, you're actually onto something." You said something that they look, but it's not real. And I was like, "Look, okay.
Yeah.
They can look, but it's not real." You said it's real, but they don't look at it.
That just screwed me up even worse.
Exactly. It would. So the teacher was pulling that shit on us, and we're 10. We're like, but then this is the best part. Like as time went on, like I honestly think having the 30 minutes and also having many more participants really helped because then once one kid fucking got it. The teacher was like, "Don't tell."
You write down his past notes, right?
And he's no. And so like he'd know, and he'd start saying shit like to fuck with the other classmates, and they'd be like, "How the fuck does Jeb know this?" And Jeb would just like spewing more answers, and then it was like slowly one more kid at a time until I think maybe only 4 kids got it. But it was funny how people could get false positives on this too, because some kids through dumb luck might get like 5 of their first 6 guesses, and they think they've got the pattern.
That would have been me.
Right, exactly. And then something doesn't fit, and they're like, shit, I thought I had it. And so, like...
And then they're really screwed.
And then they're really screwed. And then they're like, now they're over, like, deeply analyzing. And so, like, that's just it. It's so easy to mislead someone down this exercise. And I thought it was one of the most life-changing things I've ever had to be subjected to. It was hilarious. It scarred me for life.
I can tell.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely makes you think of things differently, but since humans are very pattern-centric, it makes sense.
Yeah.
But at the same time, human brains are very complex. And
And you tend to, when you think something's making sense, you say, oh, I've got it, and then you just go with that. Instead of being continually open to the way it should be progressing, you know? And that happens in science a lot, too. Like, I'm trying to think of an example. I want to say there's one with genetics. There's a couple of examples in science where they had a model that worked, and then they quit questioning that model and followed it for a long time, because it did apply to a lot of scientific applications. And then later it ceased to, or there was places where it didn't, and they were like, shit, we have to back up, like maybe we didn't. And so like the question then becomes like, if we had questioned this model more in the past 60 years, how many other discoveries could we have made instead of assuming we were right and continuing down that path?
Yeah, I can see that being really dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why it's a good weird life lesson.
People have lost their life's work off of that.
Right, because they make an assumption that seems very provable at first, but then...
But at the same time, it's like, if it is then proven false, then that's still a discovery.
Oh yeah, that's a different discovery, for sure. But like that's what's so devious and strange, is when it's 90% accurate. Or at least, even if the model's totally wrong, coincidentally explains 90% of the cases. Like, that's messed up, you know, and sometimes that happens. So that's where I was at. We can take a cut here if you want to. Cut. So I hope you enjoyed the Wally World riddle with Tim. I think I was more drunk for that than this. Because I definitely said a lot of things that didn't make sense in there. But the point is, over the course of time, God has been trying to tell us the same thing. He's been retelling the same story through Adam and Eve, through Cain and Abel, through Noah, through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Aaron, David, Solomon. Like it's all the same story. Told and told and retold. And it seems like it's just kind of random shit is happening. But it's like, no, it's not. Look at the similarities from each one of those retells. Because you're not getting it. Because each of these stories is being told in words. In English words, which is even worse, because English is a translation of Latin or Greek, and it's not the original Hebrew, but even Hebrew had its shortcomings, because it's not the language of God. God doesn't have a language. He just has an existence, and he couldn't just Vulcan mind meld his shit into our heads. We had to experience it for ourselves. We had to write it for ourselves. Because we felt that it was important to document this for future generations, but then we realized without a priesthood to maintain the culture or the idea in an organic sense, the words would be misinterpreted at some point. And that's why there was this circle jerk about theology and doctrine and all that stuff. It's just trying to make it as... The people who got it, they got it. It's in their heads. They know what they're talking about. But they can't write it in a way that is unambiguous. And that's not the fault of the writers, it's the fault of the invention of language. I want you to settle on that for a little while. And this is kind of the thing with the Wally world, right? The pattern is, this shit that doesn't go together. How can you have a house that has walls and a door and a floor and a roof, but it's not a house? What the fuck? And it's like, well, it's because you're looking at the wrong shit. You're putting it together in this realistic, physical way when what I'm trying to get through to you is the double letters thing. And it's like, that doesn't have shit all to do with real life. And you're like, you're right, because you're wasting your time with real life. It turns out real life is the bullshit. The truth is the double letters. This is kind of what runs through the whole Bible, all right? You need to read the Bible in an abstract way and see that it's history that repeats itself, that it's only one lesson being told over and over and over and over and over again, but different ways, with different faults, so that you can compare and contrast and throw out the things that are different, so that what you're left with is something that is not codified, but it's the music itself. It's not a genre. It's not a catchy little love your God above all else and love your neighbor as yourself. That's the genre, dude. But what Jesus really wanted you to know was this, and this. And he, like, if you weren't there, you don't get it. I mean, I don't know. Hopefully all this blabbering I've done has kind of gotten a general idea into, like, again, don't listen to what I'm saying. Feel what I'm trying to put through all these words. So in that same sense, I want to go back to something very basic here. God, this is such a big topic. I might want to break this in another episode. Let's cover sin first, because it's a little bit easier. A lot of people talk about sin as if it's this cosmic evil force that's always reaching to us through the universe to get a hold of our souls and crush us. And if we're going to be good, then we need to escape from sin, right? Or that sin is a heavy weight, that when you've done something wrong, it is stuck to you and it's handcuffed to you, and you'll be just punished with it forever. And some of these ideas, like the Jews definitely embraced some of these ideas. I don't know if embraced is the word, but they believed in it, they lived like it. And many Christians today still do too. It's very easy to do, especially with the way the Jewish writings are written, but Jesus kind of taught us that sins can be forgiven by God, by Jesus himself, by his priests who gave the authority to do so through confession. And sin actually doesn't have a hold on you. It's a distraction. It's a temptation. It's written in the only prayer that Jesus dictated to us, the Our Father. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Think of sin not as this dark evil force like in Fern Gully or some shit, or Final Fantasy X. Not that I ever actually played Final Fantasy X, I just know the enemy was called Sin. But sin is not a force unto itself. It's not like Satan has this black power that he's going to and take over the world with. Sin is instead like real darkness, like scientific darkness. And that is to say, there's no such thing. There's only light. And where there is darkness, it's an absence of photons. Okay? So sin is not this evil force that's going to take you over. It's your temptation to get away from the light of God's love. To go somewhere where God is not. To deny God's presence where you are. That's sin. It's unlove. If God is love, sin is unlove. The denial of love. It's not, again, not something that's coming after you, although I do think that demons are a real thing in an extra dimensional sense. In the way that, we can see things in 3 dimensions plus a fourth of time, but that doesn't mean that neutrinos don't exist, like they do in the Higgs boson. Like, they're coming from some other dimension that is real, but not one we readily perceive. So I think that demons are in, like, one of these kind of things. They're a consciousness and they exist, but not in any of the perceptible dimensions that we know of. That being said, while demons may be real and trying to draw you towards sin, sin itself is not a dark power that God would have created. Like, why would he? Instead, God is love and is light and created everything. But there are places where there is not creation. the empty space of the universe. And that's where the darkness is. It's just where God is not. And that's what sin is. Sin is that temptation to push God out. To say, no, 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 I know better than God, or this is what I want, and I know that God doesn't want it, but I want him not to be here while I do this thing. While I throw someone I hate under the bus for, and get them in trouble so that I don't have to be in trouble. Or take advantage of this other person who I want to have sex with. Or, I know God doesn't want that, but that's what I really want right now, so I'm just going to, that's what sin is. It's putting an umbrella up to God's love and saying, I'm going to take care of this because that's what I want. Sin is not a thing. It's not coming after you. It's just where God is not, where love is not. It's an unloving thing. I know what God wants, but I don't care because I want what I want. And that's carved, baked into the Adam and Eve story, right? Oh, God said not to touch that tree. Well, I know God doesn't want me to touch the tree of knowledge, but I want you, though. And I'm pretty sure God, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Or he knows, but he's trying to keep me out. Everything Satan says as the serpent in that story is things wouldn't exist if it weren't for God creating them. But let's block him out for a minute and do what we want to do. So I guess to run quickly over, I might touch on this again in a future episode, but if that's the case, then what is God's love? Because there's things that kind of get me about this, especially in English or even just in modern culture. I think this is now starting to, because of America and American culture taking over all the other cultures of the world, through movies, through music, and through our video games and every other media that we produce. Our inarticulation about what love is has fucked over every other culture on the planet. So the Greeks had 4 different words for love. There was philia, which was, I want to say, brotherly or familial love. The care for someone, the bonding, the kinsmanship of, I want what's good for my brother because we're of the same genetic line. I mean, it's baked into it. It's not like I knew what genetics were, but yeah, for the good of the survival, the evolution of this bloodline. You had Eros, which was, I want to fuck that one. Yeah, I want to do that one. I want to have that do things to me. That. You translate that as love, but that's not really love. It's more like lust. I guess you can make that a positive thing. It doesn't need to be using per se because, I really like to have sex with my wife. I think she's fucking sexy, but also she's my wife, and I've dedicated my life to her. So there's layers to that. So it's kind of more. We'll get into this in a future discussion, but at least the Greeks could make that differentiation in the way their language worked between just wanting to have sex with somebody and caring for them because they're your family, or because they are. Oh my goodness, agape was another one. And that was the way that they described old people loving each other. And it was you just want what's good for somebody for the sake of their own goodness, with entire detachment. And I think caritas may have been the last one. But I could be wrong about that. Yeah, that's a Greek word. Maybe caritas is the 4th one. Caritas is the one that we get the word charity from. That was what St. Paul, the apostle, not one of the 12, but we'll get into that later, I guess. Paul used caritas. He said, there's faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. That's poorly translated. What do you mean? It's poorly translated because English sucks. Again, the shortcomings of language. It should be translated as faith, hope, and charity, and the greatest of these is charity. Why? Because charity means you give money to a homeless person and they give you sex back. No, that's not true. That would be a Protestant. No, that'd be a prostitute. No. So no, you give a homeless person money so that they can then give you oil. No, that would be trade. You give a homeless person money so that you can get good feelings. I don't know. That's a questionable altruism. But I think the best way to describe this is no. You give money to a homeless person so that they can fucking eat, and you don't benefit at all from this. In fact, you lose a little bit because you also could have eaten with that money, or done something else like buy a video game. I don't know. But you give to a homeless person, you get nothing back. They have nothing to give you. They're not going to mow your lawn. I mean, some of them may if they're poor, but for the most part, like when you're just like donating to the poor, you don't expect anything back. You're doing it out of the goodness of your heart. Let's hope. Let's hope you're not doing it just so you can feel like a good person, which is again the question of altruism. It's a decent philosophical question, but when you do something with the expectation that you will get nothing back, that is true charity, and that's God. That's the sort of love God has and is. And we like to say, I'm not going to get into political shit right now. We're going to do that maybe in a later time. But when we say God loves us, that doesn't mean, it doesn't mean he abandons rules, his own order, just so that he can love us. He loves us first. The order comes after, and he wants us to fall in. But he loves us first. Why? Because he created us. So I guess that's philia. But then the question is, why would he create us? Is it because he's lonely? Is it because he needs the validation of us showing him praise? Actually, no. He benefits from none of that. We're the homeless. God gave us life so that we could have life. And he didn't give a shit and he didn't benefit from it at all. He actually loved us into being. Think long and hard, humbly about what that means. You didn't need to exist at all. Your life, you might think it has no meaning, you have no purpose, you don't know what to do with yourself, maybe you got a cause, blah, blah, blah. Don't fall for the shit of human beings. You exist at all because God gave you a gift of being alive at all. And he wants you to recognize how important that is. He would like a thank you. So when you praise God, it's not that you're bowing down because, you're a slave and he's the slave master. No. He just wants the simple thanks. That everything about your existence only exists because he thought you were worth existing. And he got nothing out of it. When you go to church, he doesn't need you to be there to keep living. When you take communion, he doesn't need you to be there. When you worship him, he doesn't need you to be there. When you tell your friends about Jesus, he doesn't care. He doesn't... I mean, he's happy that you're bringing other people into the fold, but if you didn't do it, he'd keep going. He could walk that shit off. So you existing at all is a gift to you. He doesn't love you like chocolate. He doesn't love you like Tiger King. He doesn't love you, like porn. Like he doesn't want to fuck you. He loves you like he thinks that you're worth existing and you should have existence. And you don't do anything for him. You don't. He can go on without you. It's no problem. He'll live. But he would really appreciate a thanks. Because he thought you mattered. Think about that shit. And again, it's written between every line of the Old Testament. The Old Testament is just a series of the same story told over and over and over. And Adam and Eve was the purest version of it. And nobody fucking got it. So he tried again, and he tried again, and he tried again throughout history. Until finally he said, I'm here, boots on the ground. Jesus. Live with me, see what I do. Be like me. Realize my order is not arbitrary. None of God's law is arbitrary. It's all there to prevent you from being distracted from falling into sin, from putting up a shade and saying, oh, no, no, I got this. God is dumb, but I know what I want, and that'll make me happy. No, 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 no. God's order and his law and the doctrines extrapolated from it by the Catholic Church are there to help you ignore the distractions, find God, see him, and realize he loves you. You did nothing to earn it. You don't even deserve it. He doesn't even care if you return it. But you should be thankful. Have a good night.